The city groaned beneath the weight of the storm. High above the skyline, streaks of lightning tangled with the metal veins of skyscrapers, their glow casting fractured reflections onto the rain-slicked streets. Somewhere in the chaos, a shadow moved, faster than sight, lighter than the wind. Flash. Barry Allen didn't feel the raindrops as he sprinted between realities, slipping in and out of existence like a whisper between heartbeats. The speed force pulsed through him, a river of untamed energy. But tonight, something felt off. Time itself shivered. The air carried a presence. Then, impact. A force unlike any he had ever known slammed into him, folding time, shattering gravity. The world flickered, light and darkness crashing into one. He tumbled through space, through existence, until silence. He stood in a place that should not have been. The walls gleamed with celestial metal, reflecting his fractured image in pieces. The air hummed with an unearthly resonance, an energy both familiar and foreign. Then, a breath, sharp, startled. He turned. Across the room, beneath the halo of golden light streaming from a hidden source, she stood. Strength wrapped in grace, power concealed within the elegance of stillness. A warrior bathed in the glow of a world beyond his own. Her eyes, skyfire and steel, locked onto his, and in them, he saw a storm that mirrored his own. A force unyielding, a presence undeniable. The air between them rippled, charged with something beyond physics, beyond time. He did not speak. She did not move. But in that suspended moment, the universe breathed differently. Then, get out. The word shattered the stillness like a meteor splitting the sky. Flash felt his own pulse stagger, not from fear, but from something deeper, something he could not yet name. The weight of her voice pressed against him, not anger, not shock, but something in between, something far more dangerous. Because even as she spoke, the air around her pulsed in recognition, as if the very fabric of reality knew what they did not. And somewhere, in the unseen corners of fate, destiny shifted. The walls trembled with unspoken tension. Flash could hear it, not just the steady hum of energy coursing through the celestial chamber, but something deeper, a silent war between forces neither of them could name. The moment stretched between them, fragile yet unbreakable. Supergirl's stance remained firm, shoulders squared, her gaze locked onto him with a quiet fire. It was not mere annoyance, not just shock. There was something else in her expression, a hesitation beneath the surface, as if she had glimpsed something that shouldn't exist. Barry raised his hand slowly, palms open. He wasn't here to fight. I didn't mean to. A flash of movement. Supergirl was on him in an instant, faster than even he had anticipated. A rush of wind, the press of unseen gravity, and suddenly his back met the cold steel of the wall. His breath hitched, more from the electric charge in the air than from the impact. How did you get in here? Her voice was quiet, but there was nothing soft about it. Flash swallowed, measuring his words. I don't know. And that was the truth. He had moved through time, through storms, through the shifting fabric of reality itself. But this was different. He hadn't just arrived somewhere. He had been pulled. Supergirl's fingers curled into fists. The golden light around her flickered as if the energy in the room bent to her emotions. You don't belong here. Something in the way she said it struck deeper than it should have. The words were meant as a warning, but Barry heard something else beneath them. Not certainty, not command, regret. His mind raced. He had seen the impossible. He had defied dimensions. But why did this moment feel heavier than anything he had ever experienced? Then a sudden shift. Supergirl's sharp gaze flicked toward the door, sensing something before he could. A shadow stirred beyond the chamber walls. The air tightened. Danger. In an instant, her attention was off him. She turned toward the sound, and in that single breath of distraction, Barry felt his body react on instinct. The world around him slowed, bending to the force of his speed. Then, a crack of energy split the air. The door exploded inward. A wave of crimson light surged through the space, burning through metal like paper. Supergirl shot forward, her form a blur of power, meeting the blast head-on. The collision of forces sent a shockwave through the chamber, knocking Barry off his feet. Through the haze, he saw them. Figures stepping from the smoke, hulking, armored, radiating unnatural power. Their presence sent a chill through the air, as if reality itself recoiled at their existence. Barry forced himself to move, his body screaming with the force of the impact. His vision cleared just in time to see Supergirl launch herself at the intruders, her strikes carving through the darkness like falling stars. She was fire and fury, a force of nature, but she was outnumbered. Barry clenched his jaw. 1 second, that's all he needed. Lightning crackled at his fingertips as he pushed forward, the world stretching into slow motion. He saw the battle unfold as though he were an outsider peering into a storm. Supergirl, relentless and unyielding, but the enemies adapting, learning. A trap. They weren't here to fight her. They were here to take her. Something inside Barry snapped. No, not today. With a surge of energy, he vanished, his body becoming nothing but a streak of light. The moment stretched, and in that frozen instant, he reached for her. She turned, just for a second, and in her eyes he saw it. Recognition. As if somewhere, someone, they had already been through this before. Then, time snapped back into place, and the storm truly began. The world broke apart in flashes of red and gold. Lightning carved jagged scars through the air as Flash moved, his body dissolving into raw speed. The invaders swarmed the chamber, their dark armor shimmering with an unnatural glow, but Barry wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about her. Supergirl met the attack like a force of nature, her movements a blur of divine strength and sharp precision. Her fists cracked through enemy ranks like meteors striking the earth, her heat vision slicing through shadows that refused to die. Yet the air carried something more than battle. A thread, invisible and unspoken, ran between them. Each time she struck, he was already moving. Each time he surged forward, she had already shifted to clear his path. Neither of them spoke a word, yet their bodies moved like the universe had written them into the same rhythm. And then, Barry saw it. One of the attackers had held back, waiting. A hulking figure cloaked in black energy raised a weapon, not for Supergirl, but for him. The strike came too fast, even for him. The blade of dark energy tore through the air, its very presence warping reality. Barry felt the burn of it, a sensation he had never known, not pain, not exactly, but the unraveling of something essential within him. Then she was there, a streak of light, a force of will. Supergirl collided with him at the last second, an impact that sent them both crashing across the chamber. His back hit the cold floor, her weight pressing against him as the weapon's arc slashed through the empty space where he had stood a moment before. A breath. Her hands gripped his shoulders, firm and steady, too steady. Barry's heart pounded, his vision still catching up to reality. Supergirl's face hovered inches from his own, her eyes scanning him, searching for a wound that shouldn't be there. Her breath was uneven, golden strands of her hair falling in disarray across his chest. The battle still raged around them. The storm had not ceased. But in this single moment, the world hesitated. Are you? She stopped herself, swallowing words she didn't dare speak. Barry exhaled sharply. She had saved him. She had moved for him in a way that defied instinct, defied logic. Because Kryptonians weren't meant to think about protecting speedsters. They weren't supposed to reach for them before thinking. His hands moved on instinct, gripping her forearm gently as if to say, I'm here. She blinked once, and something passed between them. Something neither of them could afford to name. Then, a second blast ripped through the chamber, sending them both tumbling apart. Barry rolled to his feet, his mind snapping back into focus. The enemy was regrouping, their energy crackling, preparing for something far worse than before. Supergirl was already standing, her fists clenched, the golden glow around her burning brighter. Barry knew what came next. A stand, a last push. His fingers crackled with lightning. Her body radiated light. And as they surged forward together, side by side, bound by fate or something far more dangerous, Barry realized something. This was not the first time they had fought like this. And it would not be the last. The storm of battle had no mercy. The chamber trembled as the air cracked with violent energy, shadows twisting unnaturally around the invading force. Barry felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, a force greater than gravity itself. Supergirl was already moving, fast, fierce, relentless. Her body blurred through the smoke, fists striking like falling stars, her every movement a perfect storm of power and precision. But the enemy was evolving, learning. Barry surged forward, electricity sparking at his heels, dodging between the chaos with impossible speed. He was a flicker of gold against the darkness, weaving through attacks that should have been fatal. His every step was measured, calculated, but he wasn't moving just for himself. He was moving for her. A glint of metal flashed in the dim light, an enemy shifting position, preparing to strike her from behind. Barry reacted before thought. A single arc of lightning split the air as he moved, his body a blur of momentum. He reached out, wrapped his arms around her waist, and pulled her out of time. The world stretched, distorted, as everything slowed to a near standstill. The battlefield became a frozen tableau, smoke frozen mid-motion, embers hanging like suspended stars. In this space, there was no sound, no weight of reality. Only her. She turned in his arms, her expression unreadable. The golden strands of her hair floated in the stillness, her cape curling like liquid flame. The glow in her eyes, pure, unrelenting, pierced through him in a way nothing ever had. Barry knew he should speak, should explain. But how could he? The words wouldn't come. The world had not given him language strong enough to describe what it felt like to be here, with her in a place where time did not belong. Her hand pressed against his chest. Not forceful, not demanding, just there. A quiet contact that neither of them fully understood. "Why do you keep?" she started, her voice an echo inside this fractured moment. But the answer was already written in the way he held her. Then, time collapsed. The battlefield roared back to life. The heat of explosions, the crack of steel, the echo of war. Barry barely had time to breathe before an enemy blade came slashing toward him. He spun away, lightning surging through his limbs, the tension of the moment still humming beneath his skin. Supergirl had already leaped back into the fray, her focus unshaken, but as she fought, Barry knew she felt it too. That moment, that unspoken thing between them, as fragile and dangerous as the storm itself. Something neither of them could afford to name. Not yet, and maybe not ever. The battlefield had no patience for hesitation. Flashes of light and shadow twisted around Barry as he moved, his speed bending the air, his heart pounding like a war drum. Every step was a fight against time itself, against the pull of something vast and unknown. Supergirl was in the heart of the chaos. She carved through the enemy lines like a force of nature, her fists striking with the weight of collapsing stars. Golden light crackled around her as she fought, her breath steady, her form unbreakable. But Barry saw what others couldn't. The way her stance had shifted. The fraction of a second she had taken too long to react. The tenuous hesitation lingering in the space between movements. Because of him. Because of that moment. A moment they had no right to share. A moment that had nearly fractured the battle itself. And now, the enemy knew it too. The leader of the dark-armored invaders stepped forward, his eyes glowing with something Barry couldn't name. His voice slithered through the air like poisoned silk. "I see it now." Supergirl tensed. Barry felt his pulse stutter. The enemy smiled. Two forces that should never have collided. He gestured toward them both. "Yet here you stand, tangled in something even you don't understand." The words twisted the air, turning the battlefield into something far more dangerous than just a fight. Supergirl's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." But even she didn't sound convinced. Barry swallowed hard, his lightning flickering along his fingers. The tension between them was no longer just unspoken. It had become something weaponized. The enemy stepped forward. "I do know." His voice was quiet, laced with certainty. "I know because I've seen what happens when two stars fall toward each other." His gaze flicked between them. They burn. And then, the world erupted. A shockwave exploded outward, sending both of them hurtling backward. Barry barely had time to react before the air bent around him, and suddenly he was falling, not through space, but through time. Supergirl reached for him. His hand shot out toward hers. Their fingers brushed, just for a second. And then, nothing. Only darkness. only the vast emptiness of the universe that had split them apart. Barry's breath vanished as the world collapsed around him. The last thing he saw burned into his mind like an afterimage of a dying sun. Her eyes, wide, searching, unspoken words trapped within them. And then he was gone. The silence was infinite. Barry drifted through nothingness, weightless, unanchored. Shadows of time flickered around him, fractured images of things that had been, things that could be, things that should never exist at all. His body was whole, yet he felt unraveled, like threads pulled loose from the fabric of reality itself. Where was he? A whisper echoed through the void, distant yet familiar, a voice he shouldn't have been able to hear. Her. He turned sharply, but there was nothing. Only endless space stretching in all directions, a deep and endless abyss. Then, a pull. Something unseen yanked at his core, dragging him forward through the emptiness. Time bent, his heart pounded, the world ripped open. And suddenly, he was falling. The sky roared past him, wind howling in his ears. Golden light streaked above him, Supergirl. She was falling too. The universe had thrown them back together, but not where they belonged. The air smelled of burning metal, of chaos, of something wrong. They weren't in their own timeline anymore. Barry twisted midair, reaching for her, but gravity was cruel. The ground rushed toward them. A heartbeat later, he crashed. Dust exploded around him, debris scattering in all directions. The impact sent shockwaves through his body, but he forced himself up, ignoring the pain. His vision blurred, adjusting to the strange new world around him. It was a city, but not one he recognized. Skyscrapers loomed in jagged ruins, their edges melted like wax. The streets were littered with shattered glass, the air thick with an eerie golden glow. But it wasn't the glow of the sun. It was something unnatural, something alive. A ripple of energy pulsed through the air, sending a shiver down Barry's spine. This place wasn't just destroyed. It had been rewritten. A faint sound cut through the haze. A sharp intake of breath. Barry turned. Supergirl was kneeling a few feet away, bracing herself against the cracked pavement. Strands of golden hair fell across her face as she pushed herself upright, eyes darting across their surroundings. She was breathing hard, her body tense, as if every fiber of her being recognized the danger before her mind could. Their gazes met. She didn't ask if he was okay. He didn't ask her either. They both already knew the answer. Instead, she whispered, "Where are we?" Barry swallowed hard. "I don't know." But something told him the answer was worse than either of them could imagine. Then, the city screamed. A deep, guttural sound vibrated through the ruins, as if the very air had come alive. Shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching and warping under the golden light. And then they moved. Figures rose from the wreckage, their forms flickering between reality and something else. Not human, not machine. Something in between. Their eyes glowed with the same eerie light that filled the sky, their bodies shifting like living echoes of the past. Barry tensed. Supergirl clenched her fists. Whatever had happened to this world, it wasn't finished yet. And now they were trapped inside it. The air pulsed with an unnatural hum. Barry felt it in his bones, a vibration that wasn't just sound, but something deeper, something stitched into the very fabric of this world. The figures standing before them, warped, flickering, not entirely real, tilted their heads in eerie unison, watching. Supergirl shifted beside him, her stance balanced between caution and battle readiness. Her cape swayed in the golden light, her fingers curling slightly, prepared to strike. Barry whispered, "I don't think they're." The ground trembled. A ripple of energy surged through the city, and suddenly the figures lunged. Barry moved. Lightning snapped at his heels as he blurred through the battlefield, dodging ghostly hands that reached for him. The moment they touched the air he had occupied, reality shattered, splinters of time peeling away like broken glass before reforming. Not illusions, not machines. Fragments of something lost. Supergirl struck fast, her fist colliding with one of the creatures, but instead of impact, the thing bent like liquid, absorbing the force. It twisted unnaturally, reforming behind her. Barry saw it before she did. He didn't think, he acted. A bolt of speed carried him forward, and in an instant, he grabbed her wrist, pulling her away just as the creature's shifting forms surged toward her. Their momentum carried them too close. For a fleeting heartbeat, the world vanished. The battlefield dissolved into silence as they spun together, the golden light catching in the strands of her hair, the shape of her breath mixing with his. Time wavered. Her hand tightened around his wrist. His fingers curled slightly in response, though neither of them dared acknowledge it. It was not the time. It was never the time. Then, reality snapped back. Supergirl exhaled sharply, breaking free, twisting midair to land in a crouch. Barry followed, lightning sparking around his frame as his mind raced. They couldn't fight these things the way they fought everything else. "They're not attacking," he murmured, realization striking like a bolt of electricity. Supergirl hesitated, glancing at him. Barry's voice was steadier now. "They're repeating." He looked at the flickering figures, like echoes. Supergirl frowned, eyes narrowing as she focused on the creatures, studying them. And then she saw it too. The way they moved, patterns repeating, stutters in time, moments folding back on themselves. Not enemies, memories. A fractured world, playing pieces of its own past over and over again. Barry's chest tightened. This city wasn't just destroyed. It was trying to remember what it had been. Supergirl straightened, her gaze locking onto his. The question in her eyes was unspoken but clear. "What do we do?" Barry swallowed. The weight of it settled over him like gravity itself. If this place had once been real, if it had once mattered, then something had broken it. And they were at the center of it now. The echoes shifted. Barry and Supergirl stood still, surrounded by flickering remnants of a world that no longer belonged to time. The air hung with something ancient, a force watching them, waiting. Supergirl's breath was steady, but Barry could feel the tension in her posture. The way her shoulders squared, the way her fingers flexed at her sides. She was ready to fight, but for once, there was nothing to fight. Only the truth unraveling around them. Barry exhaled. This city, he hesitated. It's not just broken. Supergirl turned toward him. Then what is it? His voice was quiet, almost reverent. A moment that shouldn't exist. The words felt heavy in the space between them. Supergirl's eyes flickered with realization. She looked around, at the streets stuck in an endless loop, the golden sky that never darkened, the echoes playing their forgotten lives over and over. They weren't in another time. They were in a memory. Someone had tried to erase this place from existence. But the universe had refused to forget. The realization hit like lightning through Barry's veins. What if? He swallowed. What if we're the reason this world broke? Supergirl stilled. The golden glow around them pulsed, as if responding. Barry continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Something's been pulling us toward each other this whole time. Through the battlefield, through time itself. What if we weren't supposed to meet? What if the universe tried to correct it, but couldn't? Supergirl's gaze was unreadable, but in the depths of her expression, Barry saw it. The same thought had already crossed her mind. The city groaned around them. The echoes flickered faster, their distorted voices rising in a soundless wail. The sky trembled, energy rippling through the air. The moment was collapsing. Supergirl's jaw tightened. If we broke this place, she turned to him, her voice filled with unspoken gravity. Then how do we fix it? Mary looked at her, at the way the golden light framed her face, at the way the world seemed to orbit around the space between them. He knew the answer. It clawed at his chest, weighing heavier than anything he had ever carried. The universe didn't just want to correct what had happened here. It wanted them separated, permanently. Barry's throat felt tight. The words burned before he even spoke them. We have to let go. Supergirl's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of something deep, something aching. The space between them was paper thin. And in that moment, Barry realized maybe they had never belonged to each other in the first place. Maybe they had only been a mistake written into time, a collision that was never supposed to happen. The echoes shrieked. The golden city cracked apart, its light fracturing. Barry forced himself to take a step back. Supergirl hesitated, just for a second. Then she nodded, a single silent agreement. Barry closed his eyes, and the world split. The golden light surged, swallowing them whole. And then, nothing. Silence. Cold air pressed against his skin. A familiar city skyline stretched before him. The hum of traffic filled the night. Barry turned, his heart hammering. But Supergirl wasn't there. Only the empty space where she should have been. A memory that never happened. A moment that no longer existed. Barry swallowed hard, his fingers curling at his sides. Somewhere across time, maybe she was looking for him too. Maybe the universe had won. But he wasn't ready to believe that. Not yet. Not ever.